what should Americans do when the president picks up the law and uses it as a cudgel to punish his political enemies and to reward his cronies? These are the questions of the day as we are grappling with Donald Trump's unprecedented assaults on our democratic institutions and the rule of law. I'm Alex Aronson, thrilled to be back with you here on Court Accountability Action with Midas Touch Legal AF. Joined today by Michael Popok, your trusty host at Midas Touch Legal AF, and an incredible guest who I think really shows what we should aspire to in the face of these affronts to our basic principles and values. Liz Oyer has been a courageous voice for truth and justice as the Trump administration weaponizes her former place of employment, the United States Department of Justice. Liz, you served as the pardon attorney until you were unceremoniously fired toward the beginning of this administration. This was a career position you held, making recommendations to the president on questions of pardon and clemency. Americans, I think, have learned too much about pardons over these last 4 months. But you were serving in that career position until you refused to go along with Trump's desire to restore gun rights to Mel Gibson. And then in the aftermath of that, you were asked to give testimony to a hearing in the House of Representatives, bicameral hearing, actually, a Senate and House hearing, which the administration in this very ominous situation tried to stop you from participating in. They tried to claim executive privilege and tried to stop you from testifying at that hearing, to the point that they sent armed U.S. Marshal deputies to your home almost, right? They had to be called off by your confirmation of receipt of an email. You did not stand down. You went forward and gave that testimony. It was powerful. It's how I became aware of what had happened to you and what you're doing. And since then, you have taken your expertise and your stories public. You have brought important litigation, challenging your termination, trying to get to the bottom of it through FOIA, and shown an important light on the abuse of the pardon power, this regime of pardons for sale that we have seen emerge. Thank you so much for joining us here today on Legal AF. Folks, don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button while we've got you. Liz, tell us a little bit more about those first days under the new Trump administration, how you felt like the rule of law was being threatened early on in the days leading up to your termination.
Sure. Thanks for having me on, Alex and Michael. I fully expected to be able to continue in my role during this administration because it is a non-political role. The work of clemency is supposed to be nonpartisan and non-political. And for that reason, the office in which I served, the Office of the Pardon Attorney, has always been headed by a career official, somebody who's able to make recommendations about clemency to the president free from political influence or considerations of partisanship. I was prepared to continue in that role, but about 7 weeks into the new administration, I was very abruptly fired. It was a Friday afternoon. I was actually pulled out of a meeting by a colleague to inform me that there were two security officers back in my office waiting to escort me out of the building. I went back there and they delivered me a very brief letter that told me I was being fired under Article 2 of the Constitution. It contained no further explanation. I was escorted that afternoon out of my office, and that was the end of my career at the Department of Justice. I was not given an explanation for my firing, but you're correct that what precipitated it was that I was asked to make a recommendation to the Attorney General that she restore the right to possess a firearm of the actor Mel Gibson, who apparently has a personal relationship with the president. He lost his right to own a gun when he was convicted of domestic violence in 2011 and was seeking to get his gun rights back through the Department of Justice. I notified the leadership of the department that I was not going to be able to make that recommendation the same day that I was fired. And literally hours later, I got this letter.
Look, from the perspective of our audience, I think the thing that is most compelling about your work there as a career attorney in that office in a nonpartisan way is now seeing you on social media, on shows like Legal AF, calling out the Trump administration for their abuse of the pardon power, or abuse of the clemency power, or at least so the American people understand what is happening in terms of taxpayer dollars, defrauded people, and others. So you have a number, it could be approaching $1 billion of through the magic wand of Donald Trump. He's just waved away with his pardons. And I guess the question is, what has motivated you to go from, frankly, we would never have really known much about you in your role, which is a good thing. We knew somebody did it, but now that you're out, you're talking directly to the American people. Talk about that shift and why that's so important to you.
Well, I don't consider what I'm doing to be, partisan. First of all, let me say that. What I care about, what I care deeply about and have for years is the clemency process and its integrity and the many deserving people whose hopes are resting on that process. There are people across the country who are just ordinary Americans who are applying for clemency to this president, and those people are being overlooked because of the way this process is being carried out currently. Those people who have actually earned and may deserve a second chance through clemency are being overlooked in favor of people who have political connections or people who have the resources to lobby for a pardon or to hire a lawyer who's connected to get them a pardon. And that is just deeply unjust. It's unfair to those people who are deserving. And it is something that really, frankly, is delegitimizing the clemency process as a whole, the clemency power that the president possesses in the eyes of Americans who are just observing and watching and saying, probably, why does this power even exist? So I'm speaking out about what this administration is doing with clemency because I believe that it is corrupt and it is corrupting the clemency power at its core, which is a power that was intended for good and that has the potential to do a lot of good. So I'm speaking out because of that. And I'm speaking out about what happened to me in terms of my firing and my treatment by the leadership of the department, because I am very scared of what the Department of Justice is going to look like in light of the decimation of the career workforce. The career employees of the department are entrusted with making decisions and providing advice to the leadership of the department based on expertise and based on the best interests of the American people without consideration of political objectives. These people, including myself, are being sidelined by the leadership of the department, and that is dangerous. It has adverse effects on public safety, rule of law, civil rights. It is paving the way for the Department of Justice to be thoroughly politicized, and I am speaking up, challenging my termination, and trying to shine a light on that because I believe it is what my fellow citizens deserve.
It's so important, and I think the theme that underpins a lot of what you're describing is it's not confined to just pardons or clemency. It's a broader rot of the rule of law itself. The very idea that people should be able to access equal justice when the law is used as a weapon to punish perceived political enemies or disfavored, discrete, and insular minorities, and as a reward to political cronies. Your coverage has been so diligent, particularly with respect to some of these corrupt pardons. We've seen this series, particularly, what was it, last week? We just saw a huge flurry of pardons. So many of them were connected to political donations made to Trump. You've got all these fraudsters, the nursing home fraudster. You've got this guy, Trevor Milton, who, this was a little longer ago, but who had a securities fraud connected to his phony electric truck company, who made a huge political donation to Trump and was able to get not only his criminal conviction wiped out, but also all of the restitution that had been ordered to the victims of his fraud. And you have tabulated this. Can you tell us more about that component of the harms that are being advanced? Because I think it would resonate with Americans. First, they'd be disgusted that you could make a giant political donation and wipe your criminal conviction off the board, but also that the victims of your fraud or your criminality are left holding the bag just because you have made a big contribution to the president.
Yeah, one of the things that's so unusual about what Trump is doing with pardons is he's pardoning people who have not yet served any of their sentence in many cases. And that includes paying any of the financial obligations that they owe to victims of what are very large frauds in some cases. Trevor Milton is the biggest single example. He owes almost $700 million to victims of this massive fraud that he perpetrated. But Trump pardoned him, gave him a full pardon before he had even started serving that sentence. The government was asking, Trump's own Justice Department was asking the court to enter a restitution order in the amount of somewhere around $675 million. And then Trump swoops in and wipes the whole thing away with a full pardon. So that's a very unusual use of the pardon power because it was granted before the guy even served any of his sentence. And it also illustrates how completely transactional pardons have become under this administration. Milton donated somewhere around $2 million to Trump's campaigns. It appears that he may have also made some donations to RFK Jr.'s campaign somewhere along the way, and he seemed to have had a role in lobbying for Milton's pardon. But that turned out, from Trevor Milton's perspective, to be an excellent business investment because he paid $2 million and then he got relieved of almost $700 million in debt. And it just shows how completely transactional the pardon process has becoming. All in all, I have added some of this up, and the president's pardons to date have forgiven well over $1 billion in debts owed by Americans who have committed financial crimes. There's more about that, by the way, on my Substack, Lawyer Oyer. You can check out my pardon trackers for more information about the breakdown of the amounts that are owed by these various individuals who've been pardoned for really massive financial crimes.
And you can find that in the notes here for this particular video down below. Let's talk about what the U.S. Supreme Court immunity decision and some dialogue, some conversation from the bench, I think it was Gorsuch, about selling pardons. And what do you think this president took away from the immunity decision as it relates to pardons and clemency? Did it embolden him?
I don't know that he needed much emboldening because, frankly, he did a lot of pardons along these lines during his first term in office. I think the difference was that there seemed to be more ordinary folks who also got considered along the way the first time around. Now it seems like the political pardons and the people, the pay for play aspect of it has really overshadowed the whole endeavor. It truly seems that this president believes that everything is for sale. All of the instruments of his power can be sold to the highest bidder. And that is what is happening with pardons now, which is not only disturbing because of the pardons that are being granted, it is disturbing because of the people who are unfairly being left behind in this process. And I do want to make sure that those folks are not forgotten about because some of them truly have earned the opportunity to be considered for a second chance through clemency. They just don't have $1 million to pay for a dinner at Mar-a-Lago to get that chance.
And who on the Trump's side in his inner sanctum is the point person for pardons and clemency right now?
Well, that was very unclear while I was in my position as pardon attorney. Mm-hmm. Typically, my office would have a couple of points of contact in the White House counsel's office, and we would have been in regular communication with them about what the president's objectives were for clemency and making sure that we could move our recommendations forward to the White House for consideration. I tried throughout the time that I was there to establish those lines of communication, but they never materialized, and it was very unclear who was actually in charge of the clemency process. It seemed certainly to be running out of the White House with very little to no input from the Office of the Pardon Attorney.
In the first term, who would that have been? Jared?
So in Trump's first term in office, I was not in the Department of Justice then, but it did seem that Jared Kushner and Ivanka played a significant role in pushing forward applications and recommendations for clemency, and some of the folks who were recommended in that administration and who received clemency really were deserving. There were also the ones that were clearly political favors, but there were some very deserving folks who got through that process, including one who's now been appointed pardon czar, Alice Johnson. She's a formerly incarcerated person who I had the opportunity to collaborate with a couple of times in my role as pardon attorney. And she's someone that I believe has sincere intentions of trying to lift up other deserving people through the pardon process, but her efforts are just being totally overshadowed by the politics and the money.
That's why I think it's Stephen Miller. What do you think, Alex?
Prime Minister Miller, I guess so. Yeah, it seems like he's controlling everything. Just to pick up on a question Michael asked around the Trump immunity decision and the pardon power of the president generally. I mean, this is one area where arguably the immunity decision maybe didn't even make that much of a difference because the presidential immunity or pardon power is so sweeping. What do you think exists by way of accountability for this type of abuse of the pardon power? Obviously, it's not just the president, as we've been discussing, who are implementing these pardons. Now we've got Ed Martin operating in your former role, whose nomination was defeated, deep ties to the January 6th insurrection. And now we've seen this proliferation of consideration of pardons for people like the kidnappers of Governor Whitmer. Seems to be a very ideologically driven pardon process. Is there any level of accountability that people could pursue for these lower level officials? And then I also wanted to ask you about what you're trying to do with your FOIA case and with your challenge under the Merit System Protection Rules to your unlawful termination. What kind of accountability might folks expect to see as that case plays out?
Yeah, the pardon power, as the Constitution defines it, is really unfettered. There's no accountability that is written into the power itself. So I think that it is a time when we really need to be having a conversation about whether the pardon power should continue to exist in its current form. I believe that it has a lot of potential for good, but that relies on the person who wields it having good intentions, and that's just not the case currently. So I do think we need to be having a conversation about whether some constitutional reform is needed in the area of pardons. And I also think that what we as individuals need to do is to continue to scrutinize these individual grants of clemency and ask, why is this person ending up on the president's desk? How did they get there? I think we need to be asking, why are these decisions being made in secret? There's a huge amount of secrecy around the decision-making process right now. I think we need to be looking at what is Trump getting in exchange for these pardons. And I think we need to be asking, who is vetting these applicants, if anyone? Is there any vetting that has been going on? One of the things that we have seen from Trump's first go-around is that many of the folks who got pardons have now ended up back in prison for new offenses. And that is directly attributable to a lack of vetting of those candidates. So there are a lot of questions that we just need to keep asking, even though sometimes it's easier to turn away. We're so inundated with these decisions and there are so many of them to scrutinize. But I think the scrutiny is important and needs to continue.
Absolutely. Well, Liz Oyer, thank you so much for leading the charge, for the courage you are showing, right, in the face of really, serious people who are doing bad things and that have affected you deeply and personally. Your voice has been such an amazingly important addition to help shine a light on this. Really encourage folks to go check out Liz's Substack blog. Did you say it was lizoyer.com? Is that right?
It's Lawyer Oyer. I'm also on Instagram and TikTok as Lawyer Oyer, and I'm making lots of informational videos about clemency. And I'm going to have a new post on my Substack soon that's going to be a deep dive on Trump's clemency grants and how unusual they are in many different ways. So please check it out.
Yeah, and they'll be down in notes. Everybody can find the links to all of the social media for Liz. And you're always welcome to come back and do hot takes on your own or with us about these very important issues. You're right. If we don't shine a light on this, we can't just get fatigued and take a pass on democracy. We've just got to continue. And our audience is demanding it and this kind of information so they can make critical decisions as we come up to the midterm. Sounds like it's around the corner. It's a long corner, but it's around the corner. And right, but these are things that should go into decision making, and I think it's starting to show up. We hopefully in the polls where people, including independents, are like, we want our vote back. This is not what we anticipated, even though he was quite honest about what he was going to do. What's the line by Antonin Scalia that's circulating again? Sometimes the wolf doesn't come in sheep's clothing; it comes as a wolf. And he told us what he was going to do, and now he's doing it. But our audience is always energized by having a guest like you on, talking about these things in such personal and meaningful terms, but also giving them something that they can do about it. And all the things we talked about here, the reform, the voting, the transparency, which is obviously missing here. Opacity is the watchword of the Trump administration. So you're welcome. Please come back anytime. Can't get your fill of Legal AF? Me neither. That's why we formed the Legal AF Substack. Every time we mention something in a hot take, whether it's a court filing or a oral argument, come over to the Substack. You'll find the court filing and the oral argument there, including a daily roundup that I do called, wait for it, Morning AF. What else? All the other contributors from Legal AF are there as well. We got some new reporting. We got interviews. We got ad-free versions of the podcast and hot takes. Where? Legal AF on Substack. Come over now to free subscribe.